Hi everyone, my name is 𝗂𝗂𝗃𝗂𝗿𝗲 and welcome to our second GAIN webinar. GAIN generally in full means Global AI Impact Network, which is a AI specialist community. So thank you for taking the time to join, and today we focus on cutting through the noise on the cultural gap is the shadow AI tax, which tackles a critical challenge which many organizations are facing right now. As AI adoption accelerates, the real barrier is no longer the technology itself, but the gap between the strategy, governance, and the culture needed to execute effectively. That gap is where hidden cost, inefficiencies, and missed opportunities begin to compound. So today, joining us at GAIN co-founders, Harjot Bambra and Louie Celiberti, will be sharing their insights on how organizations can close this gap and turn it into a strategic advantage. Just a quick note as we begin. This presentation was pre-recorded to ensure the best quality. However, this is still a live Q&A session. So leave your questions there and I will discuss them at the end of the presentation. Thank you again for being here, and we can get started now.
Okay. Thank you, Kelvin. Okay, so welcome everyone. Welcome back to GAIN, the Global AI Impact Network. I'm Harjot Bambra and co-founder of GAIN, along with Louie Celiberti, who's also here. And we are going to talk to you about how your organizational culture could lead to several financial implications. But today we're going to focus on the talk of the town, which is shadow AI tax. And if you're new here, you'll probably it'll probably help for you to know that we don't do polished, we do honest. And in the last session, we discussed details about data foundations and how data trust is bigger than data volume. And we are talking more from the perspective of AI. And today, as I mentioned, we're going one level up, because even if your data is pristine, there is a hidden gap that is quietly draining your ROI. And we'll talk about that, how we can think about ways to avoid that and what the way forward is. Most leadership teams, they aren't even looking at the shadow AI tax, but they are paying for it dearly every single day, because of reasons unknown to them. And with that, Louie, any words?
Yeah, no, happy to be here. Shadow AI is something real, right? It grew out of what we used to call shadow IT, but now it's much more prevalent. And it usually happens when people are trying to move faster than the organization. If the official AI path is slow or disconnected from the real work, it's very hard for teams to wait. So they start to find their own tools, start experimenting. So it's not really a security issue. It's a sign of something that's wrong, something that's ineffective and inefficient. The people are ready to adopt AI. Everyone's excited about it, but the organization hasn't embraced a practical way for them to do it. So shadow AI comes about when people's desire to innovate outpaces the culture.
Exactly. And to begin with, why don't we do some numbers? What we've learned is that 78% of enterprises, they use AI. Maybe the number is even higher, but only 27% of them end up governing it, and that's a big, major structural gap, which can lead to losses and breaches in the terms of your data loss. And when we compare AI-associated breaches, they might cost up to or even more, but a number that IBM came up with was 650,000, more than a standard breach. That's a huge gap, and it's due entirely to the absence of data lineage. AI is much more than just data lineage, but we can take the numbers probably from the same perspective. Now we are 4 months into 2026, and that number is only growing because that number was from last year, tending up. It's trending up because agents are becoming more and more autonomous, more and more prevalent. In fact, there are systems now. We were having a demo of just today of how agentic systems are getting built, just like vibe coding was. So it's even going to be bigger part of our lives. But here's what I would want you to hold on to, that the financial risk is actually just the smallest part of the overall tax that you will end up paying. So it's an important aspect in your strategy that we should be looking into in the coming future.
Yeah, and shockingly, it's never really a technology problem. It's a people, process, culture problem. But what's different now, and you kind of touch upon it with vibe coding and the agentic systems, is the accessibility of these tools.
Yeah.
I mean, they're everywhere. Not only are they powerful, but they're ridiculously easy to use, immediately useful. So when the organization moves slowly, users don't want to wait because they see what they have readily available to them. So they adopt these tools on their own, and then naturally you start to see a bigger shadow come about around AI, and it's let's just call it ungoverned usage.
And let's be real about that the why of that particular aspect. It is that when an employee reaches out for an unsanctioned tool, the organizations, the bosses, they shouldn't consider them as going rogue. The users, the employees are being rational, because the news is filled out these days with headlines that calls for headcount cuts because of AI efficiency gains, but there could be other reasons as well. Though the employees, the workers, they're getting the message, which is quite unambiguous, which is you adapt or become irrelevant.
No, that's an excellent point. And, they say about 40% of workers prefer the unsanctioned tools. And why is that? I mean, they just work better. I mean, this isn't governance. This is lack of enablement. They're using platforms that are built by these enterprises, these companies whose sole focus is to build intuitive, powerful experiences. Meanwhile, corporations are trying to replicate this, but they have what they've had to do for all these years, managing legacy systems, security aspects, competing priorities. It's really hard to match. So they have to figure out, well, how can they embrace these tools, what type of practices they can put into place.
Right. So that's bang on target. As a leader, there is a tendency, though, that we want to always look for someone to blame or something to blame. But this time the idea should be different, because treating every unauthorized tool in your organization, while it's dangerous, but we should look at it as an opportunity of developing our roadmap of intent. Your people are telling you that the official strategy that Louie pointed out is probably slower than what's happening in the market. So if you crush that roadmap, that intent, the productivity will suffer. And the double-edged sword is that if you ignore it, you keep paying the tax. So where is the balance? And the cost, the bigger cost and the quieter cost, is that it will never show up on your dashboard. Though realize that more and more your people are using unsanctioned tools in their personal accounts, or somehow that in a way that organization is never not able to capture the institutional knowledge. The output is going without validation. There's more fragmentation, tools being used that nobody owns. These AI initiatives that that are actually being taken up by the organization, they will look successful probably on executive dashboards. But the business value as a result of actual efficiency gain will be zero. And the AI actually driving productivity, though, will be completely invisible to leadership.
Yeah, definitely. And what people aren't talking about, which you just touched upon, is the lack of cohesion, which introduces a significant cost. I mean, sure, AI is being adopted for all the reasons you had said. Employees want to become more productive. They may fear what's going to happen if they don't. But you're having these pockets of efforts completely disconnected. They aren't aligning with the broader organizational strategy, which ironically is there to help feed a better AI experience. So knowledge is living in these personal accounts, right? The new currency out there is prompts. Think about how much you can learn from reading prompts, specifically in the context of how they're being used. So these tools are merging, there's no ownership. It clearly doesn't scale because of these pockets. The dashboards may be showing some level of adoption, but the real impact is it's fragmented, it's unvalidated, and more importantly, it's completely misaligned with business outcomes. And these companies are missing a tremendous opportunity to gain an incredible amount of insight.
Yeah, so at this point in time, we should basically stop counting the activations and start asking which workflows are driving outcomes. The governance framework should enable those outcomes and those workflows, and then make it compliant, not the other way around.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the next step is there are 4 pillars on how to address this. And when we're talking about how to address this, what we're talking about is how do we build a culture? All right. So one of the first steps is establishing what we call an innovation pipeline. This is an intentional approach to evaluate emerging technologies, exploring new capabilities, keeping both leadership and the teams informed. And instead of reacting to what's out there, reacting to change, which you're never going to catch up, the organization keeps the finger on the pulse of these emerging technology capabilities. Think about how exciting that is when an employee sees that the organization is driving insight into a ever-changing technology landscape. Along with that is establishing what we call elastic resourcing model. And similar to the cloud where you had elasticity and resource in cloud resources, what we want to do is build teams and cultures that can expand and contrast based off of demand within the company and changes outside the company with technology.
Yeah, and then let's stick to that elastic resourcing point that you brought up, Louie, because it's so important. The practitioners on this call maybe will get some value out of this, because by elastic resourcing, it means that instead of waiting for the next budget cycle to hire an engineer, prompt engineer, data analyst, or whoever, you basically take a step back and pull someone, or maybe a tech-savvy SME, from the necessary domains, maybe on the business side, and when you pull them into your team, you enable speed over hierarchy, and the work gets done much faster, and that's what, honestly speaking, that's what it actually looks like on the ground, because business needs to be involved in these decision makings and resourcing as well. Sorry,
Yeah,
Louie,
definitely.
yeah.
You know, that's how you build the cohesion of understanding, right? And those 2 gaps, the lack of innovation pipeline and overly rigid resourcing that's more aligned with corporate hierarchies, like you said, as opposed to what's truly needed, is what's creating the condition of the shadow AI. When people see that there's no, excuse me, intentional way to explore new tools, they do it on their own. When teams can't quickly access the right resources, whether it's grabbing them from within the business or actually having partnerships set up so they can supplement their current teams, they're going to look for alternatives themselves, right? Shadow AI, no one wakes up, well, most people don't wake up and say, let me figure out how to make the lives of everyone at work more difficult, right? It's not done out of bad intentions. Shadow AI comes about because they're trying the best to do their jobs to a higher level. And again, it could be based off of fear because of if they don't do it, it could be based off of pure curiosity and the intention and the want to do better. The next pillar I'd like to talk about is, pragmatic execution. And we've talked about this in the past. Simple, iterative, thin slice approaches. That thin slice has to include both functional and non-functional efforts, right? We have to be looking at it from a functional and non-functional lens. It's got to be anchored in a clear business value, but it has to be sustainable. And so the business value is the functional aspect, and the sustainability is done through the non-functional aspect. And what you're doing is you're creating natural seams when you're doing it in small pieces that allow you to either pivot or proceed based off of what the outcomes are, right? And the last pillar I just want to touch upon actually goes across each one. And it's something we've talked about almost from day one. Cross-functional discussions, cross-functional efforts. As we've said before, our problems aren't overly complicated, but they are multidimensional, right? Which requires multiple perspectives being shared collaboratively and continuously. Legal, compliance, front office, engineering, security, all being vested in a collective outcome for the organization, not just their own. Once organizations start doing this, the employees start seeing this pathway to success. And that's going to reduce the opportunity for them to do something on their own and therefore produce this shadow AI.
Yeah. And case in point being when ChatGPT just came out, employees started using them and organizations were completely dumbfounded as to what to do about them or even the knowledge about their employees using it. So financial institutions, law firms, consulting companies, they all ended up being found a little flat-footed, and their IT department didn't know what to do without approving that tool. The users were already using it. It led to certain official path which didn't exist before to be formed really quickly, and those who could form it quickly were able to kind of take the next stride forward. And McKinsey estimated that within months of launch of that event, which completely changed or brought about a new era, millions of knowledge workers had already integrated ChatGPT into their workflows, and these were not governed. There was no framework, and while it might sound like it, but it wasn't really a rebellion. It was just a rational adaptation. Each organization, some of the organizations completely put a blanket ban on top of usage of such tools, but there were others who leaned in and they found the right way much more. They got the head start and put their energy into ensuring that they don't mess with the newfound efficiency. So that's a lesson that we should always take up when we understand about our culture in the organization. And the 3 moves that actually work, just to go into the next section, is read the roadmap first before you write a single policy. So the unbiased approach would be to realize why someone or why people are taking certain actions, and that audit about people and their actions becomes a valuable strategic document if you may, that most organizations do not currently have. The utility of the tools or those audit documents comes second. The governed path must give people access to the company data and workflows that consumer tools cannot replicate. Now, safety without utility is a policy nobody follows. And that's the the measurements of these workflows comes and towards the end. Stop counting again. I'm going to the same point. Stop counting the activations and start asking which workflows, AI workflows, are actually moving the needle, and build governance around them instead of the other way around.
Yeah, excellent point. And beneath each of those approaches is a shared foundation, a culture that embeds and infuses innovation, allowing the platform to evolve, not re-engineered every 5 or 6 years. You're building capabilities, you're not building one-off applications. So it becomes an ecosystem of capabilities and functionality. Once you have that foundation in place, all of a sudden ideas are moving in and out in a very fluid manner, right? You're moving from exploration to prototyping to production much quicker than you've done in the past. Part of that is because you're able to identify the reusable capabilities. You're building off of what the previous efforts and the private efforts were, so you already got a head start each time. You're picking up a new cycle of exploration and production, right? You're moving governance away from being an overhead and an obstacle to actually being an enabler and an accelerator. People start to see that the organization is no longer beholden to this shadow AI tax.
Agreed. And while we can go for hours talking about this, we are very passionate in this movement of GAIN. So, but I guess, let's move to the next segment, which is basically how can leaders make this mean something for them? The idea is to figure out tactically at this point in time that if you're running a team and you realize about shadow AI and the shadow AI tax, what do you actually do on Monday that can differentiate you from what you were doing previous Monday?
Well, I think first and foremost, it starts with discoverability.
Yeah.
You can't understand, let alone govern, if you don't know what's out there, what exists. So there's platforms out there that allow you, based off of the behavior of the traffic, it infers and determines whether or not it's AI-driven based traffic. So once you understand that, you're finding out what's actually being used, and there's always valid reasons for using it. There's always strong principles for using it. So you're focusing on what's being used, what's being embraced by the employees of the organization, and you're setting aside for the time being what should be used. So you're starting with a foundation of understanding and appreciation of what's benefiting the employees.
Agreed. And the intent should be to not put a label or a negative connotation around the usage of these tools. And that basically means use more conducive language. That language change is important. The moment you stop calling it security risk, there is much more openness towards adopting or adapting to new innovations. Start calling it, going back to the word we used or the phrase, roadmap of intent. That's where your people are naturally channeling towards. So watch how the energy in the room will shift when you start calling it roadmap of intent, and people start shifting from defensive to being strategic. That's really important.
Absolutely. And the last piece is, find an owner, not for the purposes of control, but for the purposes of accountability. And what you're being accountable for, what that individual is being accounted for, is maximizing contribution across the organization. So you have a single person that's driving the innovation pipeline, establishing the culture where through collaboration and cohesive approaches, they're ensuring a consistent flow of understanding between the world that's evolving outside the company and assessing what is appropriate and possible within the company. It has to be done on a formal, continuous cadence. This can't be just one-off, let's have a meeting, talk about it, and come back in 3 months and discuss what we found. Continuous approaches, cohesive discussions, multi-perspective discussions, being coordinated by an individual whose sole accountability is to that effort is extremely important.
Understood. At the end of it, basically, the culture gap that you identified is the shadow AI tax, and the steps towards closing that culture gap allows you to not just reduce that tax, the shadow AI tax, you convert it into your strongest governance asset. And with that, I would say let's move over to closing the webinar. But before we close, we want to leave you with a hard question. Look at your current AI policy. Is it designed to contain a threat, or is it designed to capture the intent? The shadow AI part in your organization, is it being treated as a problem that you want to suppress, or as a roadmap of intent to act on?
Yeah, great set of questions. And what we're looking for the community, again, this whole group is built so we can share practical, real world ideas, is tell us where you and your organizations are stuck. What's the cultural barrier that's getting in the way of cohesive progress, a unified direction, and resulting in, aspects and pockets of shadow AI. Just share your thoughts. We'd love to hear it and build upon it.
Exactly. That's what GAIN is for. And when you ask question, bring the real question, not the polished one, because we all are here trying to practice the AI adoption in the right way for practitioners. Any last words, Louie, before we sign off today?
Yeah, again, it's never a technology problem. Organizations will tend to move slower than people. But the employees have to understand it's okay to move fast, but you need the organization and collective understanding in order to make those achievements sustainable. So get that culture right, build those, infuse that innovation, allow for pragmatic execution, and you'll start to see that shadow AI will slowly be removed because people are seeing value not only to themselves, but collectively across the organization.
Exactly. And for me, unmanaged adoption isn't a sign that your people are out of control. Let's get out of the way. It's basically a sign that the strategy needs to be evolving all the times, and probably make it speed it up. The gap is for you to close, and if you close it right, that's the competitive advantage that you can bear the fruits of for time, upcoming time. And with that, thanks for being part of GAIN, listening to this webinar, and see you in the community, hopefully.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, and always appreciate the time and the insight.
Thank you, everyone, and see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, so we're back after the presentation. So I've received several questions from the team. First question was from Steve. He's asking that, can you explain more the various approaches you can take to establish an innovation pipeline? Can you explain more the various approaches you can take to establish an innovation pipeline?
Sure, I'll take that, Harjo.
Sure.
There's a handful of avenues. One is establishing strategic partnerships. And there's two types of partnerships. There's complementing your engineering team with a company who provides engineering and product owner resources that you can then tap into the broader company to find out what they're doing in other areas. So that's a very embedded approach. It's just talking to your engineers and product owners from your partner and saying, hey, can you get us in touch with so-and-so about these, or what are you doing in this area? That's extremely effective. The second is more of an explicit partner. There's a handful out there that curate portfolios of emerging technologies, and you meet with them on a frequent cadence, often monthly, and they'll present anywhere from 1 to 2 of these platforms. And I found that to be extremely enlightening because it showed me things I wasn't even aware existed. It talked about problems I didn't even know I had. And it allows me to understand domains that I'm familiar with and are relevant to me, but I can better understand the domain through the platforms that are being shown, because these platforms, these companies spend all their days in that. And again, the important part is having it in a frequent cadence, right? Something that is either monthly, quarterly, or whatnot. And then from internally is building out your architecture so that they can evolve. They can evolve. I mentioned it during the webinar. You do not want to be re-engineering every few years. You want to almost have a continuous evolution.
Oh, thanks, Louie. Thanks, Louie. So we have a second question from his call, Austin. He's asking that elastic resourcing is an interesting concept, but what is needed within the existing team to execute it successfully? I'll repeat, elastic resourcing is an interesting concept, but what is needed within the existing team to execute it successfully?
First and foremost, you have to flatten the learning curves across the business and technology domains within the firm. And there's plenty of techniques to do that. Clear documentation, evolving documentation that is easy to absorb, not large reams and reams and reams of pages. Very good, effective unit testing. Optimizing your team functions, right? Having the ability to have product owners and BAs who can help with flattening the learning curve, having those individuals, those functions sustain the context that's needed to introduce new members almost at will, right? And that in doing that, you're minimizing the onboarding costs of bringing people on. In addition, that discipline, that process allows the offboarding to happen seamlessly as well, because the individual that came in to solve particular problems is not going to stay there forever. So he or she has to be familiar with the development processes and disciplines so the rest of the team can take it over. And when you do that, you truly achieve a level of elasticity. Now, it's not free. You have to invest in those capabilities and those functions. You have to be able to put, let's say, arbitrarily 20 to 30% of your ongoing engineering efforts is setting it up so that people can move in and out. That same discipline process allow your engineers to move in and out of different domains and technical areas due to demand and supply and what's important and whatnot. So if you do that internally, you can turn it around and allow people to move in from the outside as well. Oh, one last thing, very important. Supplement with AI. We talked about the virtuous cycle of AI, its ability to impact the entire software development lifecycle, from testing to documentation, requirements gathering. Any engineers on the call, I think we're ecstatic that we finally got living documentation, and that is one of the drivers to that elasticity.
Okay, thanks, Louie. So we still have two more questions. One from Miriam. She's asking that you talked about shadow AI as a roadmap of intent, but how do you actually audit it without making employees feel like they are being surveilled or punished for doing what they needed to do to get the work done? I'll repeat. You talked about shadow AI as a roadmap of intent, but how do you actually audit it without making employees feel like they're being surveilled or punished for doing what they needed to do to get their work done?
Yeah, I'll take that. So one thing to understand is the reason behind shadow AI is that somewhere in the organization there is there is a culture gap leading to usage of or stealthily using AI for users' own purpose. And why is that? It's because there is a um, negative connotation around the compliance exercise. And when you start calling out on the employees and asking them about their usage of tools as a part of the heavy-handed bureaucratic process or calling it compliance, people will shut down and they basically will probably go even more underground than they currently are. So change the terminology, call it something like more friendly, like capability discovery, workflow, workflow discovery itself. That will lead for people to open up, become contributors, and even offer the users the uh, the forums to train the powers that be on how they're using a certain element of AI, whether it's a chatbot or agents or whatever. And that's where the unauthorized tools that are being used will surface up, will bubble up, and you could take the necessary actions to bring that under adaptive governance, not shut it down. And that is the whole point about understanding what is working for your organization, which is invisible for you, but is useful for your for the people that work for you. Just to give you an example, someone was asking me recently that their boss allowed them to use AI. This is a real use case. Their boss allowed them to use AI, but they said, make sure the models do not get in the public domain. Now, this person is like, okay, I want to use AI. I have my boss's agreement to do that, but how do I make sure that it doesn't leak my information? So that kind of half-hearted allowance, it helps, but it also diminishes users' ability to take full advantage of the system. And that's where the leadership needs to work along with you, with the folks, with the employees, on how best to make sure that there is a good balance across usage and misuse of the system.
Oh, thank you, Harjot. Our final question is, the ChatGPT example was real. Place.
Sorry, Kelvin, I think we are losing you there.
And now?
Yeah, better.
Okay,
Keep going.
let me repeat. So the final question is, the ChatGPT example was real, but that was in 2023. Most organizations have since put some kind of policy in place. Are we past the shadow AI problem, or is it actually getting worse?
we are most certainly not out of the negative impact of shadow AI. It's actually worse now than it was in when ChatGPT was just introduced, because at that point in time, employees were just using the basic capabilities available in consumer chatbots. Now it has become so much more advanced that the business folks and the junior hires, interns, everyone actually, even executives, they are building their own unsanctioned agents, which and autonomous agents that are capable of grabbing the data and utilize the power of the internet, power of various services, MCPs, and everything to do their job. And that's where it's getting more and more dangerous. A policy that was basically written back in 2 or 3 years ago, it it doesn't apply to this kind of autonomous AI of that is reading emails, drafting responses, making decisions, triggering workflows, and all that. So that's why it's definitely we are not past it. Though the learning lesson, the lesson learned is um, understand the implications of why people do what they do, and then you start thinking about putting a policy on top of that. Let's first of all bring to visibility that layer which is causing shadow AI a possibility in the organizations.
Oh, thank you for that response. Those were all the questions from the team. Maybe you can share some remarks with the team about GAIN as we wind up our session for the day.
Sure. Louie, you want to take that?
Sure. Listen, what we're trying to bring is a realistic, practical, pragmatic approach to AI for the enterprises, right? And with that comes just different perspectives. It's not just coming from a purely engineering standpoint. It's coming from hopefully every party that has vested interest in this. And real world examples, real pain, real challenges that we each have gone through, and hoping that we learn from one another, being able to mentor one another in this type of forum. Also look at it as a forum for each one of you to get your perspectives out there. It's a new world on how we're getting ideas and sharing our ideas. And we wanted to provide a form and mechanism for all of our members to do exactly that.
Yeah, and yeah, thanks, Louis, for that. And the whole intent of GAIN is to bring together like-minded folks who are in the domain, who are either on the business side, technology side, or just getting their feet wet in this world of AI. There are right ways and bad and wrong ways of doing any technology, and basically our effort here is to provide from our experience and a collective community experience on the guidance needed whenever it's necessary. And it could come from anyone. It doesn't have to be just us. It can be anyone in the community or even outside of the community. And we value your participation, you guys joining GAIN and helping out, helping the ambition that we have to bring about the remove the haziness around the implementation of AI. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you for this session. Let's meet in our next session.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.